What happens when royal privilege collides with late-night television, and a prince discovers that his title means nothing in the middle of Manhattan? It only took one comment about family to turn a friendly chat into the most explosive meltdown in talk show history. Seth Meyers had hosted hundreds of guests on his late-night show. Actors, musicians, politicians, comedians. He had seen it all, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on this particular evening when Prince Harry walked onto his stage. The audience applauded as Harry took his seat, waving to the crowd with that practiced royal wave. Seth smiled warmly, ready to dive into what he thought would be a light-hearted conversation about Harry's life in America and his various charitable projects. "Welcome to the show," Seth said, gesturing to his guest. "It's great to have you here." "Thanks for having me," Harry replied, settling into the chair with an air of casual confidence. Seth started with the softball questions. "So, you've been living in the States for a while now. How are you adjusting to American life?" Harry leaned back, a slight smirk forming. "Well, it's certainly different from what I'm used to. But then again, most people aren't used to the level of service and accommodation that I grew up with." The audience laughed, thinking it was a joke. Seth chuckled too, assuming Harry was being self-deprecating. "Right. I imagine going from palace life to California must be quite the change." "You have no idea," Harry said, and there was an edge to his voice that Seth couldn't quite place. "The problem with this country is that people don't understand what it means to show proper respect." Seth's smile faltered slightly. "Well, I think Americans are pretty friendly, actually." "Friendly, yes," Harry interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "But respect? That's different. Do you know how many times I've been kept waiting at restaurants? How many times people have treated me like I'm just another customer?" The audience grew quieter. This wasn't going the direction anyone expected. Seth tried to steer things back on track. "I mean, technically, you are just another customer at a restaurant, right? That's kind of how restaurants work." Harry's eyes narrowed. "That's exactly the kind of attitude I'm talking about. In Britain, people understand protocol. They understand hierarchy. Here, everyone thinks they're equal." "Well," Seth said carefully, his voice still friendly, but with a hint of firmness creeping in. "That's kind of the founding principle of our country." "A principle that's led to complete chaos and lack of decorum," Harry shot back. "You Americans have no sense of tradition, no understanding of what it means to honor those who come from centuries of service and sacrifice." The studio audience was dead silent now. Seth could feel the temperature in the room changing. He glanced at his producers off stage, who looked just as confused as he felt. "Service and sacrifice?" Seth repeated. "I think a lot of Americans understand those concepts pretty well. We have veterans, first responders, teachers, nurses." Harry scoffed. "That's not the same thing at all. I'm talking about real service. Royal service. The kind of burden that comes with being born into a position of responsibility and duty. A burden that comes with castles and tiaras and wealth beyond most people's imagination," Seth countered, his tone shifting from friendly host to something more pointed. "You don't know what you're talking about," Harry said, his voice rising. "You sit here in your little studio, making jokes every night, and you think you understand what real pressure is? What it's like to have the weight of history on your shoulders." Seth sat up straighter. "I never claimed to be royalty, Harry, but I do know that millions of people work incredibly hard every single day without servants or security teams or trust funds." "There it is," Harry said, pointing at Seth accusingly. "The jealousy. That's what this all comes down to, isn't it? So you can't stand the fact that some people are simply born better than others." The audience gasped. Someone in the back rows actually said, "Oh no," loud enough to be heard. Seth's jaw tightened. "Better? You think you're better than other people because of who your parents are? I think I'm part of a legacy that commoners like you could never understand," Harry replied coldly. "My family has shaped the course of history, while your ancestors were probably shoveling dirt somewhere." Seth took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain his composure. Okay, I'm going to give you a chance to walk that back right now. Walk what back? Harry said. The truth? I'm tired of pretending that everyone is equal when they're clearly not. I'm tired of having to act humble when I come from greatness, and you come from, well, whatever you come from. My parents were good people who worked hard their entire lives, Seth said, his voice low and controlled, but vibrating with restrained anger. They taught me that what you do matters more than what you're born into. Harry laughed, but it was a harsh, mocking sound. How quaint. How very American. Let me guess. They also told you that anyone can be president? That you can achieve anything if you just work hard enough? They did, actually, Seth said, and I believe it. Of course you do, Harry said dismissively, because you need to believe it. You need to believe that your little middle-class existence has the same value as someone who can trace their lineage back centuries. But it doesn't. It never will. Seth stood up from his desk, which almost never happened during interviews. You know what? I've had presidents on this show. I've had Nobel Prize winners. I've had people who have actually changed the world through their actions, not their birth certificates. And not one of them has been as disrespectful or arrogant as you're being right now. Harry stood up too, facing Seth across the desk. Disrespectful? You invited me on your show. I'm doing you a favor by being here. A favor? Seth's voice was incredulous. You're on a press tour. You need this show just as much as any other guest. Probably more, given how you've burned bridges everywhere else. How dare you? Harry said, his face reddening. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Seth shot back. You're a guy who was born into privilege and somehow convinced yourself that makes you special. But you know what? In this studio, on this show, in this country, you're just another guest. And right now, you're being a terrible one. Harry's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You pathetic little man. You sit behind your desk making jokes, and you think that gives you the right to lecture me? I've forgotten more about leadership and duty than you'll ever know. Really? Seth challenged. Because from where I'm standing, you don't know the first thing about either. Leaders don't talk down to people. They don't think they're inherently better than everyone else. And duty? You walked away from yours, remember? The color drained from Harry's face, then rushed back even redder than before. You have no right to talk about my family situation. No right at all. You're the one who brought up family, Seth reminded him. You're the one who started insulting my parents. My background, my audience. You opened this door. Your audience, Harry sneered, looking out at the silent crowd. A bunch of nobodies who clap when you tell them to, and laugh at jokes that aren't even funny. They worship you because they have nothing better in their lives. That's enough, Seth said firmly. You need to leave. Excuse me? Harry looked genuinely shocked. You heard me, Seth said, his voice steady and authoritative. This is my show. This is my stage. And I'm asking you to leave. Harry stared at him in disbelief. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything, Seth replied. You came here as a guest. I welcomed you. I was prepared to have a nice conversation. But instead, you've insulted me, my family, my staff, and every single person in this audience. So yes, I'm asking you to leave. So now, do you have any idea what kind of mistake you're making? Harry's voice was shaking with rage. Do you know what I can do to your career? One phone call, and I can make sure you never work again. Seth actually laughed at that, but it was a bitter sound. Really? You're going to threaten me? On my own show? That's your move? I'm not threatening you, Harry said, but his tone said otherwise. I'm simply explaining the reality of the situation. People like me have connections. We have influence. We can make life very difficult for people like you. People like me, Seth repeated. You mean people who work for a living? People who don't rely on their family name to open doors? Those people? You're twisting my words, Harry accused. I'm repeating your words, Seth corrected. And you know what? I don't care about your connections. I don't care about your influence. Because at the end of the day, I can go home knowing I treated people with respect. Can you say the same? Harry pointed a finger at Seth. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Seth said calmly. I'm dealing with someone who thinks a title means more than character. Someone who thinks where you come from matters more than who you are. And I'm asking that person to leave my stage. This is unbelievable, Harry said, looking around as if expecting someone to intervene on his behalf. Someone get me the producer. I want to speak to whoever is in charge here. I'm in charge here, Seth said. This is my show, and you're done. Harry's face contorted with anger. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Myers. I could buy this entire network if I wanted to. I could buy you. I'm not for sale, Seth replied quietly, and neither is my dignity. Your dignity? Harry laughed harshly. What dignity? You're a late-night host. You tell jokes for a living. You're basically a court jester, except you don't even have a real court to perform in. Seth walked around his desk, moving closer to Harry. You know what the difference is between us? When I make people laugh, it's with me, not at me. Can you say the same right now? Harry looked out at the audience, suddenly seeming to realize that hundreds of people were watching this entire meltdown. Some had their phones out, recording. The cameras were still rolling. Everything was being captured. Turn those cameras off, Harry demanded, pointing at the cameramen. Turn them off right now. The cameras stay on, Seth said. You came on a television show. This is what television shows do. I did not consent to this, Harry sputtered. This is entrapment or something. It's called consequences, Seth said. You said what you said. You can't take it back now. Harry spun back to face Seth. You set me up. You brought me on here to make me look bad. I brought you on here to have a conversation, Seth said, his patience clearly wearing thin. You're the one who decided to insult everyone in the room. You did this to yourself. No, Harry shook his head vehemently. No, you provoked me. You said things about my family. I responded to things you said first, Seth reminded him. But sure, blame me. That seems to be your pattern, doesn't it? Nothing is ever your fault. Harry's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret, Seth said, matching his volume, is wasting 20 minutes of my show on someone who has nothing of value to say. Nothing of value? Harry's voice rose again. I've lived a life you couldn't even imagine. I've met world leaders. I've been to places you've only seen in movies. I've experienced things that you never will. And yet, Seth said, with all those experiences, with all those opportunities, you still haven't learned basic human decency. That's actually kind of sad. Harry's mouth opened and closed several times, struggling to find words. I want an apology, he finally said. An apology? Seth looked genuinely baffled. For what? For disrespecting me. For humiliating me on national television. Seth shook his head slowly. You humiliated yourself. I just provided the platform. That's it, Harry said, ripping off his microphone. I'm done here. This is the worst interview I've ever done. The worst show I've ever been on. You're a hack, Myers. A complete hack. Then why did you agree to come? Seth asked simply. Harry froze, the microphone pack still in his hand. He clearly hadn't expected that question. Because, Harry started, then stopped. Because my people thought it would be good publicity. Your people were wrong, Seth said. But then again, I'm guessing they're wrong about a lot of things. Harry threw the microphone pack onto the chair. You know what your problem is? You think being American gives you the right to be rude. You think democracy means you don't have to show respect to your betters. There's that word again, Seth noted. Betters. You really believe that, don't you? You really think you're better than everyone else. I know I am, Harry said, and for a moment, the mask slipped completely. There was no charm, no media training, just raw entitlement. I was born better. I was raised better. I am better. The audience booed. Actually booed. It started with one person and rippled through the entire studio. Harry looked stunned. "How dare you?" he shouted at the crowd. "How dare you boo me?" "They dare because they're free to," Seth said. "That's how it works here. You don't get automatic respect just because of your last name. You earn it through your actions. And your actions tonight have been pretty terrible." "I want security," Harry demanded. "I want these people removed." "These people paid to be here," Seth said. "You're the guest. You're the one who's leaving." "Fine," Harry spat. "I'll leave, but you haven't heard the last of this. I promise you that." "I'm sure I haven't," Seth agreed. "But it doesn't change anything. You still need to go." Harry stood there for a moment, clearly warring with himself. His face was flushed, his breathing heavy. He looked like he wanted to say more, to get the last word, to somehow salvage this disaster. "This isn't over," he finally said. "Yes, it is," Seth replied calmly. "Goodbye, Harry." Harry turned and stormed toward the stage exit, but then he stopped and turned back one more time. "You know what? You're not even a good host. Your jokes are stale. Your interviews are boring. The only reason anyone watches this show is because there's nothing else on." Seth didn't take the bait. "If that's what you need to tell yourself, go ahead." "I don't need to tell myself anything," Harry shouted. "I know my worth. I know my value. And it's a hell of a lot more than yours." "Then I guess you won't miss being here," Seth said. "The door's right there." Harry made a sound of pure frustration and fury. "You're nothing, Myers. You're a nobody who got lucky. That's all you are." "Maybe," Seth shrugged. "But at least I'm a nobody who knows how to treat people with respect." "Respect," Harry scoffed. "You wouldn't know respect if it bit you." "I know it doesn't involve calling people nobodies or commoners or telling them they're beneath me," Seth said. "That much I know for sure." Harry took a step back toward Seth, and for a second, the security team started to move forward, but Seth held up a hand, stopping them. "Don't," Seth said to Harry. "Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't. Just walk away." "Or what?" Harry challenged. "What are you going to do? You and your little studio and your little show?" "Nothing," Seth said honestly. "I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to let everyone see who you really are. And I think that's punishment enough." Harry's face went through several emotions at once. Rage, humiliation, confusion, more rage. "You think you're so smart, so clever. I think I'm someone who just asked you to leave repeatedly, and you're still standing here," Seth said. "So one of us isn't very smart. And that's for sure." The audience actually laughed at that, which only made Harry angrier. "These people are sheep," Harry said, gesturing wildly at the crowd. "They laugh when you tell them to. They clap when you want them to. They have no minds of their own. They seem pretty good at making up their own minds about you," Seth observed. Harry's hands were shaking now, whether from anger or adrenaline, or both. "I have given my life to service, to duty, to making the world a better place." "By calling people commoners and nobodies?" Seth asked. "That's your version of service?" "You don't understand," Harry insisted. "You can't understand." "Then help me understand," Seth offered, and for a moment, his voice softened slightly. "Explain it to me. Explain to all of us. Why do you think you're better than everyone else?" Harry stared at him, and something flickered in his expression. For just a second, he looked lost. But then the walls went back up. The arrogance returned. "Because I am," he said simply. And the fact that you even have to ask proves that you'll never get it. Seth nodded slowly. You're right. I won't. Because I don't believe anyone is inherently better than anyone else based on who their parents were. I believe in what people do, not where they come from. How very American of you, Harry said with contempt. Thank you, Seth replied, and he meant it as a compliment. Harry made a disgusted sound. I'm leaving, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot. You keep saying that, Seth noted. But yeah, okay. Feel free to leave whenever you want. Harry pointed at Seth one more time. You made an enemy tonight. I'll survive, Seth said dryly. Harry turned and walked toward the exit again, his movements stiff with suppressed rage. But then he stopped once more and looked back at the audience. You people, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Sitting there in your cheap seats with your cheap lives. You have no idea what it's like to matter, to actually be important. That's enough, Seth said sharply, stepping between Harry and the audience. You can insult me all you want, but you're done talking to them. Why? Harry challenged. Are they too fragile to hear the truth? The truth? Seth's voice was hard now. You want to talk about truth? The truth is that every single person in this audience has more class in their little finger than you've shown in this entire interview. The truth is that they came here to have a good time, and you've spent the last half hour proving that a royal title doesn't mean royal behavior. That's the truth. Harry's face was now a deep shade of red. I'm a prince. Then act like one, Seth shot back. Because right now, you're acting like a spoiled child who never learned the word no. How dare you speak to me that way? Harry snarled. How dare you speak to anyone the way you've been speaking tonight? Seth countered. You came on my show, and you've done nothing but insult everyone here. So yeah, I dare. I absolutely dare. Harry looked like he was about to explode. His chest was heaving, his fists clenched, his whole body rigid with fury. Security, Seth called out finally. Please escort our guest out of the building. Don't you touch me, Harry warned as two security guards approached. I'm warning you. Don't touch me. Nobody's going to touch you, one of the guards said calmly. We're just going to walk you out. I know the way out, Harry snapped. I don't need an escort. Protocol, the guard said simply. Harry laughed bitterly. Now you care about protocol. Now you understand respect and proper procedure. We've always cared about it, Seth said. The difference is our protocol involves treating everyone with dignity, rich or poor, famous or unknown, prince or plumber. You're all the same to me, Harry muttered. We know, Seth said quietly. That's the problem. Harry stood there, flanked by security guards, looking at Seth with pure hatred. This will follow you for the rest of your career. Probably, Seth agreed. But I can live with that. Can you live with how you acted tonight? Harry didn't answer. He just turned and walked toward the exit, the security guards following at a respectful distance. He didn't look back this time. The studio was completely silent as everyone watched him leave. The heavy door closed behind him with a final, definitive thud. Seth stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then he turned back to his desk, to his audience, to his cameras. Well, he said, and there was a slight tremor in his voice. That was unexpected. The audience erupted into applause. Not polite applause, not courtesy applause. Real, genuine, supportive applause. Seth held up his hands. I'm sorry you all had to witness that. That's not what we planned for tonight. We're with you, Seth, someone shouted from the audience. Thank you, Seth said, and he meant it. I want to be clear about something. I don't enjoy conflict. I don't like confrontation. But I also don't think anyone should have to sit there and be told they're worthless because of where they come from or who their parents were. The applause got louder, My parents were good people, Seth continued, his voice stronger now. They worked hard. They raised me to believe that everyone deserves respect and dignity. And I'm not going to apologize for standing up for those values. Not for anyone. Not even for a prince. The audience was on their feet now, cheering. Seth took a deep breath. Okay, we need to take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll have some actual good guests who know how to have a conversation without insulting everyone in the room. The band started playing, signaling the commercial break. But as the cameras cut away, Seth remained standing at his desk, still processing the most bizarre and uncomfortable interview of his entire career. Backstage, staff members were already dealing with the aftermath. Harry had apparently demanded his car be brought around immediately. He refused to speak to anyone. He wouldn't even look at the producers who tried to apologize or smooth things over. Back in the studio, Seth's producer approached him during the break. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Seth said, though his hands were still shaking slightly. "Is he gone?" "He's gone," the producer confirmed. "Left through the back entrance." "I wouldn't talk to anyone." Seth nodded. "Good. Let's just get through the rest of the show." "That was brave," the producer said. "What you did, standing up to him like that." "It didn't feel brave," Seth admitted. "It felt necessary. Nobody gets to talk to people like that. I don't care who they are." The producer squeezed his shoulder. "The audience loved it. You did the right thing." Seth wasn't sure about that. He wasn't sure about any of it. All he knew was that a guest had come on his show, insulted everyone present, and refused to leave when asked. And Seth had finally had enough. The commercial break ended. The cameras came back on, and Seth Meyers did what he always did. He smiled at the camera and continued with his show. Because that's what professionals do. They don't let one terrible guest ruin an entire evening. But everyone in that studio knew they had witnessed something unprecedented. A talk show host had kicked a prince off his show, had stood up to royalty, had chosen his values and his audience over celebrity and status. And in that moment, on that stage, Seth Meyers proved that in his studio, everyone was equal. Titles didn't matter. Lineage didn't matter. What mattered was how you treated people. Harry had failed that test spectacularly, and he had paid the price for it.